Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us for tonight's webinar. We are going to be diving into the Ebird Citizen Science Project and really talking about one, how you can participate, and two, how this project and the data that is collected in it can help you teach your students to be more familiar and comfortable analyzing and looking at data and drawing cross-cutting concepts. So before we go too far along, I want to take a second to introduce you to Zoom. If you haven't used Zoom before, though I assume most folks have in recent times, I just want to recommend that you exit full screen and select your chat window options so that you can have the chat window docked to the side. So you're going to want to look for the little icon that looks like a speech bubble and says chat. And that'll allow you to have it docked to the side so you can converse with each other and myself and Susan as well. And then the other thing you'll want to make sure that you do is change here in this to field. It should either say to all panelists and attendees or to everyone. So we are coming to you from the Cornell Lab of Ornithology, where our mission is to interpret and conserve the Earth's biological diversity through research, education, and citizen science, all focused on birds. And unfortunately, it is not quite that lovely as it is in this picture here today. It is snowing and windy, really starting to feel like November here. My name is Kelly Schaefer, and I'm an outreach coordinator with the K12 Education team, where our mission is to interpret and is to create innovative resources and trainings that build science skills while inspiring young people to connect to local habitats, explore biodiversity, and engage in citizen science projects. So really what we get to do is take all of the amazing stuff that's happening at the lab and try and make that more accessible and usable for educators. And one of the really cool projects we have at the lab is Ebird, which is a citizen science project. And it's just a really awesome opportunity for kids to get hands-on experience in science. And all of our resources and trainings kind of follow along this pathway. We have three pillars: nature connection, citizen science, and inquiry investigations. And they do sort of feed into each other, but some folks will come to us for nature connection activities, getting kids outside, observing, getting their hands dirty. Citizen science is another strong pillar here at the lab and something that we love to support for educators, and then going all the way to inquiry investigations where kids ask and answer their own questions in science. And we support these three pillars by creating resources from one-off activities to full curricula, and then providing teacher professional development such as these webinars and in-person experiences as well. One of the reasons I get excited about talking about citizen science is that it's super relevant. So you may be familiar with this study that came out last year about the state of birds in Canada and the United States. A study looked at the total number of birds across all species since 1970 and found that we've lost 2.9 billion birds. That is a pretty staggering number of birds. And it is some cause for concern because it comes out to be about 1 in 4 birds gone since 1970. That's just in a human lifetime. And that spans across a lot of different groups of birds, from grassland birds to boreal forest birds. We're seeing some sharp declines: 3 and 4 meadowlarks, 9 and 10 evening grosbeaks. So this is putting up some red flags to us. And the reason that I bring up this study is because a large part of the data that went into this discovery came from citizen science projects. So from the Christmas bird count, which is one of, if not the longest running citizen science projects in North America. What I find heartening about this study, and there's more later about what's heartening, is that it was picked up in lots of different news media and New York Times and articles in the BBC and things like that. So people really care about our birds, and when we saw that this disappearance of birds was happening, it put up alarm bells and people were engaged and interested. And it's one of these big questions of our time, how are we as people affecting the planet that we live on? And this is something that is super relevant for the kids that we teach. So this is a really awesome opportunity to allow kids to dive into this paper that was published, start talking about how the data was used and reflect on that, and then also figure out ways that they can be part of the solution. And I think citizen science is a big part of that. But before we go too far, I want to throw a question out to you. I want to ask, why birds? Why do you think people care about birds? Why did this study affect people? Why do people watch birds in the first place? You can feel free to share your answers in the chat window. Yeah, they're everywhere. Absolutely. Birds are everywhere. So everybody has access to them. Everybody can see them. Everybody has a story of an encounter with a bird or a time they've heard a bird. So birds are part of our lives in a very real sense. And they're beautiful. Absolutely. Yeah. Birds are very moving, right? They're beautiful. They sing, they fly. There's something about birds that really speaks to us. And that's one of the things that makes them such a great teaching tool is everybody has access to them and they're pretty compelling. And just those two things combined helps answer kind of this essential question of like, why should we care? Because we share the planet with these birds, and what we do can affect them and their ability to survive. All right. So I've talked a lot about citizen science already, but I want to make sure that we are operating on a shared definition of what citizen science is. So if you could share in the chat window just some keywords or a definition or even a project that you think of when you hear the term citizen science. Global Big Day. Yeah, that is a citizen science project, absolutely. Public participation, definitely. And public engagement. Yeah, bioblitzes. Abby saying, iNaturalist, documenting what people see around them, and scientists using the data for their projects. Yeah, I like that you guys had a range of different projects and different types of projects. BioBlitzes kind of focus on one area and determining the biodiversity that's there, whereas something that Global Big Day is looking at, bird diversity across the globe on one day. Yes. So what we comes down to a definition for citizen science, we can definitely say that citizen science is where regular folks like you and me who aren't professional scientists or are students can go out, make observations, document those observations, and share them with professional scientists to help answer real world questions. And what's cool about this for our students is that they get to use some basic scientific protocols. So it's a cool introduction to scientific protocols for them. They're collecting data that then is actually being used. So what I love about citizen science is that there are just a wealth of opportunities out there, from the local to the global, from the microscopic to the universe, all online or all outside. Whatever situation you're in and whatever your students are interested in, there's probably a citizen science project out there for you. And we really here at the lab view these as kind of partnerships where people help scientists answer real world questions. So again, it helps answer that essential question of why are we doing this? Why does it matter? And so if birds aren't your thing and your kids are super into insects or super into plants or into the stars, there are citizen science projects out there for you. And there are some resources that can help you connect to them, like scistarter.org, which I'll ask Susan to share that link in the chat window for you. And so what's wonderful about citizen science is that your data really matters, right? You're collecting information that's getting used. It goes to a larger project. I loved science in school. You know, I loved doing experiments and seeing the cause and effect and getting my hands on things in that way. But I always kind of felt like there was something missing. Like I already knew what was supposed to happen. Citizen science opens up a window where you are part of figuring out the endpoint of this data that you're collecting. You're not doing like a confirmation experiment. You are creating new knowledge, and that's really powerful. And whenever I talk about citizen science, I like to share this image. So I'm wondering if in the chat window you want to share what you think you are looking at, what this image represents. Light pollution, yeah. It does look a lot like a light pollution map, doesn't it? Oh, Paige is guessing that it might represent people who have taken part in citizen science. Getting warmer, Paige, absolutely. So this map, each point of light represents a submission to the Ebird database. The fact that we can see the shape of our world this clearly is because there are that many people out there who care about birds and who are sharing their sightings with the eBird database. What that looks like by the numbers is more than 800 million observations, more than 42 million checklists, more than 500,000 participants, recording more than or around 10,507 species, which is about 99% of all of the Earth's bird species. So if you think about what it would take a team of scientists to replicate a database like this, it's just not possible. They couldn't do it. It's only possible because of citizen science. It is people-powered science. So let's talk a little bit more about eBird, what it is, how to participate, and what makes its database so special. eBird is a citizen science project where you can record any bird you see anytime in any location. So it runs year round and works all over the world and is available in multiple different languages and conglomerates these sightings from every country in the world. And I'm going to share a video with you that does a good job of introducing eBird. And let me know in the chat window if you have any issues hearing
Every day, millions of people around the world enjoy watching birds and recording their sightings.
What if there were a way to take all of these observations, yours, ours, everyone's, and put them all in one place?
If we could do this, we would fundamentally transform not just birding, but science and conservation.
From this idea emerged Ebird. Put simply, Ebird is a way for anyone around the world to store their birding observations, their photos, their sound recordings, and make them available to educators, scientists, and birders. It's incredibly easy to use, and it's incredibly powerful. All you do is let us know where you went birding, when, how far you traveled, and what you saw. It's powerful because hundreds of thousands of people all around the world are doing it, and it's growing. Ebird already safeguards 500 million sightings, information that allows all of us to understand the movements and needs of birds at global scales. Ebird maintains your lists for you and shares them with other birders from around the world. By sharing, it's now possible for anyone, anywhere, to find your target birds and the best birding hotspots any time of the year. Before Ebird, there was no way to comprehensively understand population-level movements of many species. By combining your sightings with remote-sensed habitat data from NASA, we're able to generate species distribution models that provide an unparalleled view of where and when birds are in the landscape. Scientists and students all over the world are now able to use Ebird datasets for their research at a variety of spatial scales. These observations help inform better conservation strategies, opening the door to the future of bird conservation. And this is just the beginning. With the help of millions of people who come to Ebird each year, we are creating a free, open access system that is easy to use, fun, and rewarding. Rewarding for birders, for scientists, for conservationists, and ultimately the birds themselves. Go to ebird.org or download Ebird Mobile to get started, all for free. By joining Ebird, you're joining a global team of people that share your passion for birds. Be a part of it.
That gives you a little bit of a taste for the scope of eBird and how it works to bring together all these different sightings from all over the world. I saw in the chat window there was a question about data from Project Feeder Watch, whether it could also be reported on eBird. So Project Feeder Watch has some really specific protocols that they follow, so you can't submit that directly to eBird. They don't talk to each other, these two databases, because the protocols that they follow are different. But you could be doing Project Feeder Watch and also submitting an eBird list, just following those separate protocols. And we do have some folks who will do that. All right, so, oops, there we go. What does it take to participate in eBird? Step 1, identify and count birds. Step 2, enter that data online or with the mobile app. And eBird asks you a few simple questions to try and get at some good metadata or attached information that allows them to analyze your sightings. Those include who was there, where were you, or in the case of who, we just need one person to contact in case we have questions. Where were you? When did you go birding? For how long? And how many people were in your party? You can see, you can either do these submissions online. So if you like to keep a paper list, you can absolutely do that. But if you have access to mobile technology, you can use the Ebird app, which will track both where and when and how long you go birding for you. So it covers some of that metadata for you. And you can do all sorts of different types of counts with Ebird. The two most common are going to be stationary and traveling. So stationary would be if you're watching a pond or you're watching your bird feeders. Traveling would be you're walking around your schoolyard or a local park. There's other types as well that come up less frequently. One would be like an incidental sighting. So you are out with your kids and you saw a bald eagle fly over and you just wanted to make sure that you got that bald eagle submitted. That would be an incidental sighting. It means you weren't like paying attention to the other birds around at the same time. And maybe this all sounds great and you're like, cool, I want to participate in eBird, but I just don't really feel confident in my bird identification skills. And I totally understand that feeling. The good news is that anybody can learn to identify their local birds with a little bit of help and some practice and some good resources. And fortunately, there are lots of good resources out there for you. Our Bird Academy website has a great set of videos called Inside Birding. You can also find those on YouTube. I should say with a caveat that today and tomorrow, Bird Academy and eBird are down for maintenance. So if you want to go try and check these things out right now, you wouldn't be able to do it. All About Birds is another awesome resource. This is our online field guide. You can look up birds, you can learn about their life history, ID tips, cool facts, listen to sounds, see a lot of pictures, compare them to similar species. Everything that you can do in a field guide, you can do, plus having the benefit of actually hearing the sound and sometimes even seeing videos. Another resource I want to make sure that you're aware of is Merlin. Merlin is a free bird identification app that is available on Android or iPhone, or you can even use a web version of it from allaboutbirds.org. And this app asks you 5 simple questions to help you identify your bird that you're looking at. The first 2 questions your phone already knows. Where are you and what is the date? And then it asks you what size is the bird on a scale of common birds? What were the main colors that you saw, up to 3? And what was the bird doing? Was it eating at a feeder, swimming on a pond, on the ground, in trees or bushes? And then it's going to generate a list of possible birds that you might have seen in your area on that date. And it knows this because it's hooked into the eBird database and is using all of those years of data to help make those predictions. Merlin also has another really cool feature that I feel like is a little bit less known. You can actually get a list of your local birds. So if you go to the Merlin app and you go to the Explore Birds tab, and then you go to the top hamburger menu on the right or slider menu and select your location and date, you can filter by most likely birds over here. And what that does is that allows you to see a list of the most likely birds you are going to see if you walk out your door right now. And that's pretty awesome. And if you're planning to prepare for a unit that's like a month away, you can change the date to be the time that you're going to do the unit and see the birds that you're most likely to see at your location during that time period. What's awesome about that is it allows you to do some prep work and kind of figure out what birds you might want to teach your kids before you go out that you have the most chance to see. So it narrows down the amount of birds that you might need to know a little bit. Another thing we like to do with those lists are called focus birds. So you could, if you have 20 kids, you could dole out the first 20 birds on the list, and each kid could do a research project on that bird or just a simple field guide page where they draw it and figure out, 3 keys to identifying the bird. And that way you have 20 little experts with you when you go out on a bird walk. So, 20 species as a class. All right, so I couldn't get this video to embed, but I still want to make sure that we get to see it because this is what your data looks like once you submit it.
The Species Maps tool allows you to explore real-time sightings for any bird species in the world. Whether you want to find where to look for that rare bird or just want to see the reported range of the birds in your backyard, this is the tool for you. Begin by entering the name of a species you're interested in learning about. Let's look up a map for osprey. The purple areas on the map show everywhere an osprey has been reported. The darker the purple, the higher the number of sightings. Did you know that ospreys have been reported on 6 out of 7 continents? You can even refine your view to a specific date and location. Ever wonder how many osprey have been seen in southern Spain? Let's find out. Look at all those sightings. Sightings within the past 30 days are in red, older sightings are in blue. Let's zoom in to get a closer look. This area looks like a great place to see osprey. Clicking the points allows you to see sightings and checklists at that location. Some checklists have photos or notes to read, indicated by these icons. The species map is a great tool for finding those special birds you've always wanted to see.
So if you go out and you submit your sightings, this is where they go into this database. So you can look up all of the sightings that other people have of the same species that you saw, or you can drill down into this data. You can see the checklists from other people. So I love this function. I love going into the Species Explorer page with kids because it really kind of is an awesome opportunity to like look at those different dots on the screen and see how many people are participating and see these different checklists at these different locations. So it really brings home kind of who is participating in these projects and what this data actually looks like. And so this is the raw data. This is the data as it comes in after it's been reviewed and confirmed. This is what the raw data looks like. But eBird goes a lot further with its data too. So let me get out of this and back to our PowerPoint. Oh, I've lost my pointer. There it is. Okay. So this is something that has come out of eBird data that has been put through an analysis process. And I want you to just take a moment to watch it through a cycle or two and think about what you're noticing and what you think this map might represent, and share those thoughts in the chat window. Bird migration paths. Yes, absolutely. So this is a map showing the migratory pathways of 118 different species. The dots on the map that you're looking at represents the geographic center of their range on that day. And as you can see, it goes by every 2 days. So this is an incredible level of data that we're seeing here for 118 different species. So it gives you a sense of how species move through this hemisphere through time. The next section of data that I want to share with you from Ebird are these amazing status and trend models. There are more than 600 now. I know it says 122. There's more than 600 available now. And this is the website where you will find them. Again, unfortunately, Ebird is down for maintenance until early morning on the 19th. But you'll highly recommend you check it out after that. So what Ebird allows us to do is drill down to a really, really fine level of detail and predict the abundance of birds for a particular species during a particular time of year and where they are. So the next couple maps I'm going to show you are Ebird abundance maps. So they show the predicted abundance of a bird during a particular time of year. And they're actually created with supercomputers. So all these sighting data goes in, it gets combined with land use data, satellite imagery from NASA, population density information, and all gets put together to create these models. So I'm going to show you 2 different ones of mystery birds. And while you look at these, I want you to think about what you're observing and what the differences between the 2 mystery models might be. All right, here's our first one. Let's watch it one more time. So you're noticing that the model starts in January and then goes through December. So right now we're in June, July, August, September, October, November, December. And our relative abundance, we're looking at the darker the color, the more abundant the bird is at that location. So any just first observations that anybody has that they want to share about this one? Let's look at the next one. Keep thinking about what you're noticing pattern wise and what the differences between them are. So let's look at our next mystery one. Let's watch it one more time. So here we are in early spring, summer, fall, winter. So what did you observe between these two maps? Were you able to detect any differences? So what we're seeing right here on the screen now is a snapshot from January. Okay, so we're seeing a little bit of seasonal movement in both maps. Let's go back and look at that first one again. Yeah, definitely a little bit of seasonal movement, a shift in abundance maybe. I feel like maybe I'm seeing more like lateral movement, maybe some side to side movement, east and west. Let's look at our next one. So the second one is showing that the birds really only summer in the US before moving on. Yeah. Second one has more vertical movement, north south. Yep. Winter is restricted to a smaller area. But in the second map, the birds travel a lot farther vertically. Absolutely, yeah. So we are starting to piece together some differences that we're seeing. We saw maybe a little bit of east-west movement in the first one, and we saw a lot more north-south movement in the second one. And you guys are basically describing what we're seeing in the second one. Seasonal movement in each map, summer in the US, winter is a smaller range. So we can say for sure, just from this map, that we're looking at a migratory bird in the second example. The first example doesn't have that north-south movement. It's got maybe a little bit of east-west, but that happens kind of in the winter where birds, or the summer, where birds tend to spread out a little bit more and be on their territories. So that one is actually a resident bird. So what we're looking at is a resident species, one that doesn't migrate much, versus a definitely migratory species. So anybody want to hazard a guess on either species before I reveal? This is our early webinar, so maybe not many people know our West Coast one, but our year one, round one, I would almost guarantee that you've seen before. Have a guess of Canada geese for the first one. It's a pretty good guess, right? Really broad range. There's definitely some movement that happens. Canada's geese might have a bit more north-south migration in it. Robin is another good one. They tend to be more year-round than people realize, but they're partial migrants too. Chickadees and swallows. Chickadees would be a good guess, yeah. All right, and swallows for the migratory one would also be a good guess. Let's check it out. All right, so map number one is actually our friend, the American crow. These birds do tend to flock up at different times of year and break up their family groups in the winter and come back together in the summer. So there is a little bit of fluctuation in movement that you see in these populations, but it's not the classic migration that we think of. It's more like dispersion. Our second bird is the Bullock's oriole. And this is a migratory species. hangs out in Central America during the winter. All right, so why do we think that these two species' annual cycle is so different? What do you think might be the cause of that? So this is where we're starting to get into that cross-cutting concepts, right? We've been looking at patterns. Now we're thinking about cause and effect. Abby is guessing food. That is a good guess, Abby. Do you want to elaborate on that at all? Climate. Yeah, those two things are really tied together in this instance. Oh, nice answer, Laura. Yeah, crows are generalists, so can stay around to eat food that is available at different seasons. And Appy's saying food availability in different seasons. Absolutely, yes. This is the root of migration. I know we often think of the cold as being the root of migration, but really most birds are actually pretty good at thermoregulation. They're pretty good at surviving the cold as long as they have enough calories. So it comes down to food. It comes down to what you eat. So if we were to look up the American crow on allaboutbirds.org, we could head over to the life history section and read about their diet. And we would discover that crows eat a huge amount of food. As Laura said, crows are generalists. They eat whatever they can get their beaks on. Grains, seeds, nuts, fruits, berries, trash, all sorts of different animals. So their food is around all time of the year. They can switch depending on abundance. Whereas something like this oriole has a much more restricted diet: insects, fruit, and nectar. And winter means that these foods are not available. So the oriole better pack its bags and head to someplace that has the food resources that it needs. So that's what you're going to see is really kind of the breakdown of who can stick around and who can't, is what their diet is. If it's strictly nectar, if it's strictly insects, if they can't switch over to berries like an American robin can, then they're going to be a migratory species. So you start to see all these opportunities for looking at these models, these data-rich models, starting to make some inferences and observations, do some comparing and contrasting, doing some research and figuring out the cause and effect behind the patterns that you're observing. So this is kind of a way to bring this data to life, to contextualize the data that you're submitting to eBird and start to understand how this can help lead to conservation implications, right? If we can see where these birds are during a particular time of year and understand how that relates to their life cycles, we might be able to start picking out key areas of concern for conservation efforts. Let's check out another cool way to explore eBird data. Oh, here, this is kind of contextualizing the migratory cycle that we often see with our insectivorous birds. All right, so the other part I want to talk about with eBird is the Explore tab. Again, you won't be able to check this out tonight, but definitely recommend you play around in there starting on Thursday. This tab is where you can dive into the data. It's where you'll find the species maps that we saw in the video, and it's also where you can start to really see some patterns in different species across time. So I recommend going to the bar charts section, and this will allow you to look up birds in a particular region, and it'll pop up these green bar charts. And next to that, you'll see an icon for a line graph for a particular species. If you click on that, you can generate line graphs like this one. And you can add more species to them. You can add up to 5 species to compare them all together. So here we have mourning dove in blue, bald eagle in pink, northern mockingbird green, red-winged blackbird gold, and yellow warbler purple. And we can look at the frequency of sightings across a year. So again, we have January all the way through summer over into December. So here's our year on the x-axis. Our y-axis is frequency, or the percent of times that this bird was reported on lists. So if you went out during that time of year, how likely are you to see this bird? So for example, in June, our red-winged blackbird is reported about 65%, 70% of the time on a list. So pretty cool. And we can start to see different patterns in what we're looking at. So we can see down here, this is in Delaware. This is from a location in Delaware, so on the East Coast. Here we can see that this yellow warbler has a very different pattern from all of the other birds. So if we look at this, we can see no reports through April, then some reports, and it seems to disappear again in October. Anybody want to make any inference about this bird from that information? Migratory, absolutely, yes. And we can see some different patterns here. This bald eagle almost seems to have the reverse pattern, like it's more abundant and then becomes less abundant in the summer and more abundant during the winter time. And so bald eagles are one of those species that are partially migratory. So they'll gather in areas where the water is still open during the winter. So you might actually have more bald eagles in an area during the winter than in this part of the country than you would elsewhere. And that's where this starts to get really interesting. You can drill down into these differences here. You can make some conclusions and inferences about this data, but you can also start to see how things are different between different bird species. So different between different locations. So let's check out this graph. This is from Utah. And again, the same colors represent the same birds. Here is the bald eagle. This is way less common here in Utah than it was in Delaware if we look back and forth. Again, the same pattern though, that there's a dip in summer when it becomes less abundant. Then we can see this yellow warbler is more abundant, same kind of pattern, that very clearly migratory pattern that we saw in the other one as well. Whereas the northern mockingbird is much less common here in Utah, this green line, than we saw in Delaware. So let's look in on this bald eagle. There's a pretty big difference in the frequency between Delaware and Utah. And if we wanted to drill down into why we think that might be, we can go back to, oh, I had the nice comparisons right here. So you could see here much more clearly the difference between the bald eagle in the two. So if we want to drill into that, we can go back to our status and trends. In status and trends, there are lots of different things that you can check out if you click on a species. You can see abundance animation, which is what we were looking at before. You can see abundance maps, which are really, really fine detail snapshots of particular times of year. And then you can see these trend maps. This is where I want us to go for our bald eagle. So let's check out the trend map for the bald eagle. So if we look over here, we can see that red indicates an area where bald eagle are decreasing. Blue indicates areas where bald eagles are increasing. And then there's kind of this gray, which is just your status as usual. If we look over here to Delaware, we can see that bald eagles are actually increasing. If we look over here to Utah, we can see in these areas that bald eagles are actually decreasing. So, you might have a general difference in relative abundance, but it would be cool to drill into this data and generate those line graphs for like 20 years ago, 10 years ago, and now, and see how that changes over time. And if you're picking up in those frequency graphs, the decline that you're seeing in this trend graph during the non-breeding season. So what Ebird allows us to do with all of this data and all of the other resources we have at hand is really get a good picture of where birds are when, how they're doing. So this data is going to be the data that picks up changes in population level trends. And we can start to see that when we look at these trend graphs. If you are interested in eBird and interested in participating in the citizen science project, but you're feeling like you want a little bit more background information, you want to understand how the data is handled and how best to enter and submit high quality data, I recommend the Ebird Essentials course. This is from our Bird Academy team. It is a free course. It'll take you about an hour, hour and a half. And when you complete it, you'll be like, okay, I get it and I can do this. So I definitely recommend it. It'll walk you through how to submit data and answer any questions that you have about that. We also have some resources available to you on our website. We will be releasing, fingers crossed, this spring, our Ebird curricula, which will be articulated across the grade bands. So we have a K2, 3, 5, 6, 8, and 9, 12 version that are all NGSS and Common Core aligned. And they dive into Ebird and some supporting content around it. So for example, our 6-8 lesson is all about biodiversity and connects biodiversity and evolution to citizen science and eBird. So we do have free lessons available on our website right now if you want to check those out and see what they're about. You can check out that free sample lesson. All right, bringing it home. Let's go back to talking about our 3 billion birds that we lost. Because I told you earlier that there's reason to hope, and there absolutely is. Here are 3 groups of birds that we saw positive trends in. So over the last 50 years, we've actually seen an increase of 15 million in raptors, 35 million in waterfowl, and 14 million in woodpeckers. And in each case, it's because we knew these birds were in trouble and we made concerted conservation efforts to support them, and we saw them bounce back. So what this says to me is that when we know there's an issue And when we put our minds to it and we put our funds behind it, we can turn things around and bring these birds back. That's where citizen science data comes into play, because it is things like Ebird, it's things like Project Feeder Watch, and things like the Great Backyard Bird Count that are going to be giving us the rich species level trend data that we need to know when species are in trouble. And also, it's going to be the data that shows us when our conservation efforts have been successful, and we can start to see that these trends have reversed. So citizen science data is the future of bird conservation. I really do believe that. And so do a lot of the Cornell Lab of Ornithology's partners. So in conjunction with this 3 billion bird paper, a bunch of conservation organizations came together and developed these 7 simple actions that you can take to help birds. Definitely recommend you check it out, but I wanted to highlight this one. Do citizen science. Participate, watch birds, share what you see, be part of our information gathering apparatus, be part of the solution. So that's where eBird can really provide your students with a sense of connection to their world and a sense of empowerment, because they can help us understand it and help us bring birds back. So with that, I hope that you are interested in eBird. I hope that you're excited about diving into it and checking out some of the awesome data resources that we have. Please feel free to always contact us with questions. We do provide certificates of completion for our webinars. So if you would like a certificate for 1 contact hour, just email us at k12lab@cornell.edu and we'll put one together and send it out to you. Any questions? Abby, I totally agree. Making data visible is so important to help kids understand why it matters and feel that connection to science. Totally. Awesome. Well, I'm going to go ahead and mute myself. Oh, I should mention before I do that we will be posting a recording of this webinar, or the one that we're hosting Thursday night, on our YouTube channel on Friday. And I'll make sure to put all the relevant links in the description. I'll also send out an email to everybody who was registered with the link to the recording and the relevant links. Hope to see you in a future webinar. Please feel free to ask questions. I'll be hanging around for a couple minutes, but I am going to mute myself.